Hi there, so in this video we're going to have a look at how we can try and introduce a little bit more realism in the animations that we're doing in CSS. And what we're actually going to base this on is Disney's 12 Principles of Animation. So there's loads of material on this on the web, so well worth having a look at. The basic idea is that at the beginning of Disney, when there were large numbers of people doing hand-drawn animations. Some of the staff there produced some guidelines or these 12 principles to try and ensure the quality that everybody was working through and a consistency across Disney. So we're going to have a look at using some of those principles in our animations to try and improve the realism and the presentation of them. So our starting point is just to take something like this really simple bouncing ball, so the kind of thing that we've been working on already, using keyframes to do a simple ball bounce. So if I just have a little look and a reminder of how this works, here's my HTML page, and here we have got a div with my class ball animation, and I've got an image in here which I've called class equals ball, and I've just found a simple tennis ball image with a transparent background that I'm using. So this is my HTML, and my style sheet is at this stage fairly straightforward. So standard things at the top, the same stuff for basic styling, centralized 960 pixel column that we've been working with already, and a very simple little animation at the bottom. So we've got a set of keyframes here, and these keyframes are called ball bounce, and I'm translating in the Y dimension, the vertical dimension, by 400 pixels my ball. So if we look down here at the actual CSS for the ball itself, so this is the image dot ball, the class ball, and position is relative, which makes the position relative to the parent element, which is this div here, and I've placed the ball 400 pixels down the screen. So it's important to remember that in computers and on screens, 0 or the top equals 0 is at the top of the screen, and the Y dimension increases as we move down the screen. So placing the top of the ball 400 pixels will push the ball 400 pixels down the screen. And I'm using the ball bounce animation here. So I'm using that keyframe, that set of keyframes, 4 seconds, no delay, running through the animation just once, a linear timing function, and normal direction through the animation. So that's my animation. These are my keyframes here, ball bounce, and I'm making the ball start off at the top of the screen, minus 400 pixels from its original position, move down to the bottom, bounce effectively, go up half height to 200 pixels, and down again. So that's my starting point, and that gives me the animation that we've just had a quick look at. So we can see that this is not brilliantly realistic. So there are some things that we can do to try and help, and we can think about Disney's principles of animation to try and help a little bit here. I'm going to start off really simply just by introducing more bounces. So here we go with just playing around, just making it a bit more realistic with more bounces, and that is really simple thing to implement. If all I've done here is just, if I look at the style sheet associated with that animation, then all I've done is increase the number of bounces by playing around with when we hit 0 pixels. So we go 400, one bounce at this point, back up to half height, another bounce, back up to quarter height, and come to rest on the ground. So not a massive change there. The starting point for the realism is to add something called squash. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to look at my keyframes for my animation, and what I'm doing is I'm going to squash the ball when it hits the ground. So we know that when a ball hits the ground, it doesn't maintain its shape all the time, it squashes a little bit. So this is squash and scale are Disney's first animation principles. So we're going to use that here. And what I'm doing, I'm just at the moment scaling in the Y dimension. So what I'm doing is if I don't specify a scale factor, then nothing happens. So just the ball maintains its shape. And then I've changed the keyframe so that just around the bounce position, I keep my scale as 1. When I go through the bounce, I squash the ball to half of its normal height. Coming out of the bounce, I go back to normal shape again, so scale Y is 1. And then at the next bounce position, because it's bouncing from a lower height, I'm only scaling it now to 0.75, so I'm squashing it to 0.75 of its original height. So simple little thing used in the scale transformation, and if I have a little look at how that works, if I go to index 3, then if I just replay that so we can see the baseline, so we can see that we've got a little squash thing going on at the bottom of the bounce. So that's the first sort of step that we can make using Disney's principles. The next one is to introduce a sense of anticipation. So what I'm going to do here is, if I just have a look now at this, editing Notepad++. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. I need to be looking at index 4 for this, and my style's 4. Okay, so here we go. So for anticipation, what I'm doing is, rather than starting the ball bounce straight away, I'm just going to hold it at the top position for half of the animation time and then release it. So that's going to generate a sense of tension and anticipation in the viewer. So I've done that. There's a number of ways I could do this. I've decided to do it in the keyframes like this. So I don't now start the animation proper until I get to 50% of my way through the animation time. I've also changed the animation time from 4 seconds to 10 seconds just so that we can see more easily what's going on. At the end I can change it back to 4 seconds to make the whole thing a little bit faster. So if I look at how that works now, so if I look at index 4, then we can see that there's an anticipation that something's going to happen with this ball hanging in the air, and then it does drop down to the ground. The next thing I want to do is apply some focus to the tennis ball. So at the moment, yes, I've got a stage here, but that stage is quite large. I want to draw the user's attention to where the action is going to happen. So I'm going to apply a kind of a spotlight thing on the tennis ball. So to do that, what I'm going to do is, in the index page, have this thing, another div, class equals spotlight, and that's just going to allow me to style something that's going to essentially give a stage to what's happening. So this is Disney's animation principle 3 is staging. So we're going to stage this by placing a spotlight for the to keep the attention focused on the ball. And in the style sheet, I'm going to have a look at what happens here. And there's no change. We're not changing anything to do with the animation now. We're just applying this spotlight, and that's just this particular part of the CSS that's just applying some colouring and some bordering to a really trivially simple piece of staging. So obviously with all of these things we're illustrating the basic principles, but we can work harder on the design to make it look nice. But now my eye is focused on where the action is going to happen. That's fine. The next thing that I can do is I can play around with the timing function. So Disney has a animation principle number 6, which is called slow in, slow out. So this is basically saying quite often what we want to happen is the animation to start off slowly, run at normal speed if you like in the middle, and then finish off slowly. So all of this stuff, again, all of the keyframe stuff remains the same here, not making any changes to that. I'm just going down to where the animation is actually called, which is here, and this line here, animation timing function, I've used this one, ease in, ease out, or ease in out, to do a slow start, fast in the middle, slow finish. And I think with these things, really it's a matter of trying these things out, having a look, using your judgment, using your own eye and judgment to see whether you think things look better or worse, whether it's had no effect. So here we can see that the animation is slowing down towards the end, which I think has some value in this particular application. The next thing I want to do is add another dimension. So rather than just having this ball falling up and down here, I'm going to actually make it fall and bounce across the screen like this, almost like someone's thrown it in from the side. So this is the Disney animation principle of arcs. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, change the HTML a little bit. So we can see here in the HTML, I've now added another div. So I've now got div class equals ball animation for the whole stage, div class equals spotlight to focus on where the ball's actually bouncing to do that proper staging. Now I'm going to do div class equals arc to allow me to move the ball across the screen. So what I need to do next is to look at the styling for that. Okay, so oops. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at my style 7, edit with Notepad++, and as I go down here, if I go down to the bottom, here's my div.arc, so it's, because it's a class, it's the division of class equals arc in my HTML, and I'm applying a standard kind of animation trigger here. So my keyframes are called ball X. I'm using the same duration of 10 seconds, the same delay of 0, the same iteration count of 1. Sometimes people like to use interesting timing functions, so this is an example of one of those kind of things. It's pretty much impossible for us, I think, to do any kind of mathematical or scientific calculation for which timing function we should use and what these numbers ought to be. So I think really at this stage it's best just to have a look on the internet, see what other people are doing, maybe copy a timing function and maybe have a little play around with these things and use your eyes to tell you what works best. So we've got an animation called ball X, so let's go and find the keyframes for that animation, which is here. The first half of the animation is just the anticipation phase, so the ball's sitting there waiting for something to happen, so we're building up tension with the viewer, and then all we're going to do is move the ball 400 pixels across the screen from -400 to its final position. Okay, so from -400 pixels, which is the left hand side of the screen, to its final resting place, 0 pixels on the right hand side of the screen. So once we've done that, I can take a look at that and see how that works for me. We can see that the spotlight's now expanded to fill all the area that the ball is going to be in, and we're bouncing the ball across the screen. So the next thing that we're going to have a look at is the Disney principle of number 8, which is secondary animation. So we've animated the ball bouncing across the screen, but it's pretty unlikely that the ball will sit in this exact orientation all the way as it bounces across here, and it's much more realistic to say that the ball will rotate as it bounces across the screen. So if we were to have a look at doing that, then if I look at my next style sheet, then what I've introduced here is a little bit of rotation. So there's a transformation. I'm already in the transform, I'm already translating in the Y direction. I now also want to rotate in the Y direction. So I want to look at this, and again, it's really difficult to do an actual calculation about how much rotation you need, and it's basically a matter of having a look, putting some numbers in, looking to see if it seems to be visually correct. If it is, that's fine. If not, have a play around with the numbers. So I've done a bit of messing around here to try and find what I think is a sensible amount of rotation, and also figured out some intermediate rotational values for these different keyframes. So if we look at that, then we can see that if I just go to this stage, then the ball as it falls now will start rotating, and to me that rotation speed looks about right for what we're trying to achieve. The final thing that I can do, or the final thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to go back to my squash principle, and I'm going to try and see if I can improve that a little bit. And what I'm going to do is, at the moment the ball squashes in the Y dimension, but what I want to do is also stretch it in the X dimension. So when it hits the ground, it squashes in one dimension, the vertical one, but it actually expands in the horizontal one. So if I have a little look at how that's going to work, if I look at my style sheet, then going down here, this is the ball bounce, that's the X transformation, and now I've got a new animation called wobble, and you can see that what I'm doing is at the bounce points, which are 60% and 80%, I'm increasing the X dimension of my ball. So I'm expanding the ball at this point. At the same time as the ball is expanding, it is squashing in the Y dimension. If we have a little look down here at the animations, we can see that I'm now calling two animations, or two sets of keyframes. I'm calling ball bounce as one set of keyframes and ball wobble as my second set. If I have a little look at that, we now should have a touch more realism on the impact points, and that's I think a decent example of the kinds of things that we can do to work an animation to be a bit better than it is when we first start. So it's a really useful thing to have a look at Disney's Principles of Animation. There's some great resources and tutorials on the web for different things that you can do with these things, but we're looking to, particularly if you're doing a story type of animation, we're looking to apply a bit of realism to the situation using some of these principles.